Get ready to touch that dial with your host, Spike Nesmith.
Another great find here, a station it would take 8 hours to drive to from my front door. WSB in Atlanta, Georgia, featuring your bog-standard white, straight, right-wing talk show host telling a firmly pro-Trump story that I suspect is at least partially apocryphal. The station fits the glove of late 20th century American AM talk radio perfectly, a format crafted and championed almost exclusively by the late Rush Limbaugh. But that's not why we're here. From 571 miles away from my porch, this is talk show host Shelley Winters on WSB Atlanta.
So we had the greatest conversation, funny guy, right? And we're just cracking up, laughing. And so the interesting thing is no one really talks politics when you're meeting people from different parts of the world. No one asks you, who'd you vote for? Are you Republican or Democrat? None of those questions come up. But they do come up when someone asks, well, what do you do for a living? And you say, well, I'm a talk radio host in Atlanta, Georgia on 95.5 WSB, Atlanta's News and Talk. You should listen, right? Because I do that everywhere I go, no matter who it is, right? And then I tell people that are from other countries, listen to WSBradio.com. Not that anybody won't get credit for them, but I still want them to listen, right? Magic money. But anyway, long story short, so I'm talking to Ash, and when he asks me what I do, I tell him I'm a talk radio host, and he tells me, the first question out of his mouth, oh, are you a right-winger? And I said, well, I'm not sure if I'm a right-winger. I guess in terms of the, globally, or, I could be as a right-winger, but I don't really like that term. I'm conservative. I vote mostly Republican, but I'm conservative. I voted for Democrats before, but I'm conservative. I don't like the term right-winger. So the next question was, are you a Trump supporter? And I said, yes, I am a Trump supporter. I'll probably be voting for him in the coming primary. And so I said, well, you're not from America. What are your thoughts as someone from London? What are your thoughts on Donald Trump? And he said to me, this was his answer, I think Trump is a clown. I said, okay, that's interesting. He said, but I also think Biden has been a disaster. And he's a banker, so he's looking at it purely from an economic sense. Now, he's not some rabid populist who wants to destroy the world with capitalism. He self-described himself as left of center, and I describe myself as right of center. So we're both in the same sphere there. We overlap, right? That Venn diagram, we have some overlap in some areas. And so when he said Trump was a clown, but Biden was a disaster, I asked him, I said, well, if you lived in America, who would you vote for? He said, I'd probably vote for Trump, even though I would hold my nose. But he's not a disaster, right? And it got me thinking, why do we put so much on the personality of our politicians? This purity test that your politicians have to be pure. We've never trusted politicians. We've always thought, until Trump came along, everyone in America, if polled, would say their politicians are liars. Right? We would all say that. Then Trump comes along and they count his lies and they stop counting when Biden gets elected. You know the fact? 10,000 lies. It's Trump told 10,000 lies. You counted the lies from a politician, quote unquote, but you don't count anybody else's lies that are also politicians. You just stop with him, right? So that's how you know the fix is in. But even beyond that, it's interesting. It got me to thinking. When he said that, it got me to thinking is, why do we care so much about the personalities? Like, why? Like, people say to me, well, Shelley, you shouldn't vote for Trump. Even Republicans will say this, character matters. Character matters with politicians? Like, since when? Since when the character matters? Oh, yeah, that's right. When Bill Clinton did what he did with Monica Lewinsky, character matters, right? But the same people that said character matters with Bill Clinton excuse all the Trump character issues, right? So it's just interesting to me why we care about this. I care about effective politicians. That's all I care about. Are you effective in a job that you're hired to do, elected to do? Do you keep the economy running? Do I go to the store and get sticker shock when I go shopping? Does the economy keep humming along when you're the president? Do policies that make sense get passed? Like maybe closing the borders. I'm not asking for a moat at the border, but hey, 10,000 people a day probably isn't the safest thing in the world. Right? So why should I care about a man's character who's a politician? Because we're talking about politicians. We're not talking about our ministers. That's another story. There's a bunch on that, right? That's a bunch on our ministers about character. Well, we'll get to that later on in the show. But I did want to talk about my meeting of this young man, banker, beautiful family. 13-year-old son. He's a DJ. His son, you can find him on Apple. He's got beats on Apple Music. His name, he goes by Beat Boy. 13 years old. Got some great beats on there. Shout out to him. But he said, when I asked him, well, what do you think of Donald Trump? He said, he's a clown. But Biden is a disaster. And I found that very interesting. And I ask you as Americans, as voters coming up, the election's coming up, I ask you 448-720-750, 1-800-WSB Talk. Would you take the clown that's effective and shown to be effective because he had 4 years before he was not reelected? Or would you take the disaster who's had 4 years and it's been a total disaster? Me, I'm going to go with the clown. Because me, I'm not looking at the character of my politicians. By definition, they have none because they're politicians. 448-720-750, 1-800-WSB Talk. This is Shelley Winter Show. We're live. We're local. We're everything. We'll be right back.
Okay, not the strongest signal in the world compared to the clarity of some of the other clips we've listened to, but you can hear everything okay. If not, go back and turn the subtitles on. That'll be interesting. It's almost a shame to have this technology at our hands, to be able to turn a dial and listen to a radio station 571 miles away and have the content be as vanilla and samey as this. 4 out of 10 Nesmith. Must do better. Next week, in the season finale, we'll meet a guy who really hates Christmas. He doesn't even like Santa, for goodness sakes. Till the next time we touch that dial, I'm Spike Nesmith.